Hey folks, this is the critique for the reaction assignment. In this one, this is a review. I provided you an audio clip that you had to create a convincing performance of a character reacting to the person talking. Your requirements were, again, create convincing performance of the reacting. Your animation has to last for at least the length of the clip, but you can add more at the beginning or end. The character talking must be off screen so we don't see them. The one that we hear talking. You should be using facial expressions, head movement, and at least one hand gesture as part of the performance. Choose a good camera angle. Any character you want is fine. And again, I highly recommend that you shoot some reference for it. But it's not required and you don't have to submit it. Your grading is going to be based upon originality, timing, weight, overlapping action, quality of poses, nuance of movement, and quality of render. But the big one here is going to be about timing and poses for the most part. The rest of it is just about good animation skills. So here we go. All right, Elliot, you're up first. Let's take a look at what we got.
I couldn't do that. Could you do that? How can they do that?
All right. This is nice. It's simple. It's straightforward, but I think it's successful. Mostly in the sense the animation's really good. It's tight. It's good quality. Good sense of weight. Good sense of movement. Good nuance of gesture. You have all these things happening.
I couldn't do that. Could you do that? How can they do that?
It's a nice job using the body as well. In this, it's subtle, but it's nice. It just feels good. Good sense of weight on the hand. I like the expression. So overall, I'm really liking this. In terms of the timing, also really nice.
I couldn't do that. Could you?
You're a little bit early on this first look. He's already talking
I couldn't do it.
when your character starts to look. I'm sorry, I should say it the other way.
I couldn't.
Your character starts to look on pretty much the exact frame the character starts to talk. There needs to be a delay there for sure. It's like he's anticipating the other character talking, but what I do like here is that the character is staring straight at them. So we identify that they're out of frame, and your framing supports this. Watch your eyeballs, though. You're probably you're a little bit too far with this one. This one's fine, but this guy is about to go cross-eyed.
Could you do that? How can they do that?
Same thing here with this one. I think
How can they do that?
the look here, the actual gesture itself is really nice, but it's a little bit early. So again, it's like he's anticipating what's about to be said, and you don't want that. So you could probably take this whole animation and offset it by like 12 to 20 frames, and it would time out, look a little bit more convincing. The only thing I'd say here that doesn't work as well, it's not totally clear what's happening. I would guess they're camping or something like that, except for when he says, how can they do that? We're looking up at the stars, apparently, or the sky. So maybe it's an airplane, but I love the pose. I'm just not sure what he's looking at and trying to figure out the situation. So that doesn't work as well as it could. But I like the idea of this character is questioning how can they do that, and it's something maybe celestial, and that's sort of exciting in a way. In terms of who the character is and what they're engaged in, that's not very clear either. So it's sort of like a memorable performance or original performance, not happening quite as much. It's not super exciting to watch. It's just really solid. So I like solid. So you're in good shape. But if the character was maybe the character was like using a telescope or something like that might be a bit more interesting, more compelling about the situation. Or if they were taking notes in a journal or something like that. So the fact that the character is just chilling means that there's not much to invest in for this character, for us. So that's the only kind of deficit I'm seeing here, that and your timing being a little bit off. But other than that, I like that it's sort of downplayed and that ultimately it just sells well. So nice work. All right, Saniya, you're up next. Let's take a look.
Yeah, I'm 30 years older than you are. Had my back broke once and my hip twice. And on my worst day, I could beat the hell out of you.
All right. So first off, I really like the fact that you use this character in this context. It works great in terms of the I'm 30 years older than you. although from the voice it sounds like 60. That's a joke. I think it's a great choice. And of course, the fact that they could beat the hell out of him, and it's the Airbender. So I think these are great choices. Nice props too. They all look really great. In terms of the performance, I think you're doing a really nice job here. It's a fun to watch performance in terms of the character being sort of a little bit insolent, annoyed. Like the personality is coming through really well. The context works great for this as well. Clearly they're connected in some way, but obviously not besties. So I think that's really good too. There were some comments made to, some very specific comments made in class, and we were teachers in class about like the hand here, the gesture.
30 years older than you are.
Yeah, sure. But overall, I love what you're doing there with it. The main thing is just, that kind of weird tuck and slide.
30 years older than you are.
But it's actually not even the tuck and slide. I kind of like that something's a little bit not a perfect arc into place. This one was just more about the weight, and that I don't really feel any weight on the hand here. So it would be good to have some settling of the upper body and the head onto the hand and showing that compression there, meaning the hand pushing down, would be nice. My main, I was going to say bone to pick, but that's actually not. My main suggestion here, I think this part
30
is
years
a
older
little
than you
underplayed.
Had my back broke once.
Or pushes the burger away. I love the idea. For me, the reason why it doesn't work as well as it could is because he's clearly annoyed and being dramatic about it, which again works because he's younger. So in this case, a much more dramatic push where like he pushed it way across the table. Compositionally, this looks good, but thematically, I would expect him to like really make a big show of pushing the burger away. That I'm not, that he's not interested. So I think that could be played up a little bit.
First day I could beat the hell out of you.
I think your reaction time here is really nice. And again, I love the fact that he has a reaction first and then looks over. Is really, really nice. Nice work in the blinking too and the eyes popping. I do question where the eyes are looking. So if I'm looking at this, it looks like the character, he's not looking across from him. He's looking somewhere probably up around this level. So it's not someone that's sitting down, but it'd be someone on the other side of the wall. So it's kind of a weird eye line there. It would make much more sense in this case if he's looking at someone that he's eating with. So watch those eye lines. I think back even just like a few millimeters to the right on the eye would put the person talking to him just across at the other booth. So you're a little off there. I don't quite buy it.
Yeah, I'm 30 years older than you are.
The other thing here too, I like this pose with the hand, but then as you draw attention to it with those fingers,
Had my back broke once.
moving, and then coming back to the same pose, that's awkward. I don't mind you drawing attention to it. It keeps it alive, which is good, but just bend the fingers and keep them in. Going back to the exact same pose is always going to feel a little awkward. So when you copy poses or reuse poses, make sure you change them a little bit to keep things alive and keep things feeling believable.
Hip twice, and on my worst day I could beat the
Little finger twitch is nice. Doesn't hurt anything,
beat the hell.
keeps things alive, but it does draw attention to the fact that this pose feels kind of locked in and very specific. So be a little careful of that. But overall, I'm being picky here, Saniya. This is a really great shot. So nice work. Hey, Alexander, let's take a look at what you got.
Yeah, I'm 30 years older than you are. Had my back broke once, and my hip twice. And on my worst day, I could beat the hell out of you.
All right. So first of all, I love the location setting. I think that's really smart and works out really well in this case. He sounds like an old cowboy, because he is. And that works in sort of this bar situation. It actually works well with this character too. So lots of good choices there. I like your overall sense of direction, is that the character is, at the bar doing their own thing, there's someone talking to them that they're dismissing with the eye roll. They go to drink, and then they get the surprise comment that makes them stop for a second. That being said, I think there's a number of performance issues here that make that, while the idea is really good, make them not sell as well. So let's take a look at some of those. Because I'd love to, I mean, it's just great. It's such a great setup. The biggest one by far is your eyes. You're doing some really awkward things with your eyes. The main thing is that they're constantly moving or looking at things that don't make sense. So this is a fine start, although it's not clear what the character is engaging with at the very beginning. So, you know, are they looking at the bartender? Are they checking out the drinks in the back? It just feels, the character feels that they're kind of spacing out. Part of that is they're sort of slight cross-eyed, but part of it is there's no clear target where they're looking. So you might probably be much stronger if you had them looking off to the side and then turning to look the other way when the person starts talking to them. Something that feels more directed and less just like the character left in like sort of default staring straight ahead. Or maybe they're looking at the drink and checking out the label, something that we can see. But right now I'm not buying that initial stare. And then the character, you know, in the middle of this move stares straight at us and then back at the thing over here, whatever that was, before looking off to the side. This eye is disappearing, so we can't really see where that one's looking, and then adjusting that again. Now, I know technically speaking, probably the eye aim is in the same place from here to here, but we don't care about where the eye aim is. We care about where it looks like the character is looking. Right here, with the pupils buried into the right side of his eyes, it looks like he's looking as far to the right as he can. Whereas here, it looks like he's looking straight ahead. And technically speaking, they're probably in the same place. So this one needs to be adjusted so it actually looks like he's looking down the bar. This one's actually probably accurate. I like your eye roll. That's pretty nice. But right here, you kind of do a weird reverse eye roll, and that's really confusing on the heels of the last one. And then the eyes are sort of floating through the sockets, so it's not locking in on anything apparently. And then you have the same issues going back. Here, for the surprise moment, that's not bad, but your eyes are uneven. This one's looking more towards the wall in front of him, and this one's looking clearly far to the side. So this often happens with different characters with different eye sockets, and you have to adjust the pupils individually, or the irises individually, so that they look like they're looking in the same place. So this needs a definitive pass in the eyes. And here, once again, we have lots of drifting eye positions. This one is him looking to the far right, this one is looking him straight ahead, and this one's looking ahead but in a different place. So it might be that your eye aim control has different options for, maybe in this case some characters are just bad at, you know, at giving that appearance that their eyes are locked, and you have to manually do, like, sometimes frame by frame, fix the eyes. In that case, it might be better not to have the locked position, but have them locked within the head, and you have to fake them holding their targets. I don't know if that makes sense. If it doesn't, come talk to me. But just doing an eye pass in this would be huge difference in terms of how we feel like the character is engaging within the scene. There are a number of other issues, though, too.
Yeah, 30 years older than you are.
Again, it's not clear right here where the character is engaging or what they're engaging in. You also have this bottle is constantly floating around. So it strikes me you probably don't have this in IK mode, and you definitely need to, so that bottle is locked.
Back broke once.
His right arm, I think, is stuck in that position for the entire shot. Pretty much. It's pretty awkward, especially after he has a surprise moment. But it also just feels really stiff. You need to find excuses to let that arm relax.
Yeah.
And even worse, it's kind of hovering a little bit, so we know it's not resting on something and therefore has a reason to be stuck in that position. I like your movement on the back. Like, this is actually good. But again, there's a lot of stiffness in those shoulders. They feel like they're just kind of locked in place. And there's no sense of weight on that glass. It's constantly floating in here, even through the bar. So
The hell out of you.
You got to get that arm on IK. When he drinks...
Twice. And on my worst day, I get beat.
Not really buying it. It's like it's like you're trying to do charades to tell me he's drinking, but he's not actually drinking. He like opens up his lip and pours some liquid in. It's weird. So you have to really figure out that pose or that gesture. Reference would definitely help here, and make that gesture happen. That includes the expressions too.
Beat the hell out of you.
Sometimes less is
The hell
more.
out of you.
I think actually this moment would sell much better if it was just his eyes flick up and it wasn't accompanied by like a classic take gesture. It's just a moment of awareness. I think would be a bit stronger.
Hell out of you.
It's not like the take is bad,
The hell
but
out
it feels it's very stiff.
Day I get beat the hell out of you. Day I get beat the hell out of you.
And it's a little bit early.
Day I get beat the hell out of you.
He would really need to say the you part. The you part is what's actually causing him to be surprised. And again, I think it'd be pretty funny if he's just drinking and then like his eyes just look up and like flick up, and actually in this case, less being more. It's also this weird thing where expression-wise, this is a very odd expression where we can see his jaw's open, but his teeth look like they're on the top of his mouth. Not sure what's happening there, but we're seeing like tongue and then his gums on the bottom teeth is what it looks like. So looks like the teeth didn't come along for the ride. It's really weird. That might be a rigging issue, but you have to make that look good. And then of course the expression just locks in there with the mouth and feels very dead there too. So again, overall good idea, but the execution is a bit stiff and a little sloppy. All right, May, you're next. Let's take a look at what we got.
We're not doing this, gentlemen. We are not going to do this. We're not going to go bouncing off the walls for 10 minutes, because we're just going to end up right back here with the same problems. We're not doing this, gentlemen.
All right. So first off, I love that you use this character in this context. It's a great setup. That's also like the world's smallest net, it looks like, or the world's biggest pole. Anyway, doesn't matter. I love this. I think this is so smart. You're the first person, I think, find a really good clip for this particular, a really good context for this audio clip, but it works perfectly. So kudos to you on that. There's a lot of good animation here. I love your ideas. You know, the fact that he's in the middle of play or practice and then has to release, you know, that moment. That little gesture there is so great with the face. I love it. And then this sort of like insolent, like, oh man, coach, really? Like, geez, guys, come on. Like, all those feelings are there and they work great. I would say on a timing basis, I think your timing is great all the way through until this gesture.
Get right back here with the...
This one, I think it's a little bit early.
Because we're just going to end up right back here with the same...
Because he hasn't really heard anything of what the coach is saying there. So either he's responding to the fact they're being yelled at all. Well, not either. That's kind of the only thing he'd be responding to at this point. So it makes more sense that he would be responding to more what the coach is saying. Like, come on, man. Like, you know, we're trying, whatever, you know. Just let us practice or whatever. But I think that gesture is...
going to end up right back here with the same problems.
You know, ideally, he'd be responding to that entire sentence, which would mean he couldn't really respond until somewhere around here. There are some mechanical issues here, and there's some expression issues. The main one being the eye roll.
Off the walls for 10...
We don't actually roll our eyes like around in a full circle when we roll our eyes. Usually it's more of a flick up with the eyes and occasionally a roll to the sides. Often it just doesn't even have the roll at all, even though we call it an eye roll. So I'd recommend doing some reference for this and seeing what it looks like, because doing it like this starts to feel very cartoony and doesn't actually read correctly. I wouldn't say not even cartoony. It just doesn't really read the way you want to. We know what you're saying, but it doesn't actually just read that way.
10 minutes. Because we're just going to end up right back here with the same problems.
little clunky here at the end
Problems.
with the basketball. So this gesture here, there's a little bit too much flexing on the fingers. So at this point, that ball's already dropping. His fingers are off of it. And yet it actually sticks to the palm all the way for him to be able to do that. This gesture here. I like this part. That one's cool. But the part leading up to it doesn't really make sense. All these parts in here, though.
We are not going to do this. We're not going to go bouncing off the wall.
Read well in terms of the this hand and the ball. The supporting hand, like this actually reads totally fine.
Doing this, gentlemen. We are
but then here you can see the hand isn't connected to the ball at all, and kind of destroys that illusion. So
balls for 10 minutes, because we're just going to end up right back here with the same problems.
once the hand isn't part of the holding onto the ball part, it's a little bit floaty. Like you're delayed on these fingers. Like I'm not sure what these fingers are doing there. Like it's like they're still grabbing on the ball, but they're not.
We're just going to end up right back here with.
And then here,
End up right back here.
like it's just kind of constantly floating around. And then it's also really gooey. So like this part here, lots of overlap, but this, you have a much more realistic character. So you have to be a little bit stiffer and a little bit more reserved with your movements in that case. But that's really the main stuff. I mean, I watched this a few times now, quite a few times. You're doing a really nice job on the overlap. The poses are really great, really believable. Again, I'd tell you to work a little bit more on your hands. He's kind of got weird hands anyway, but a lot of times they're stiff or super like over the top elegant. But the gestures themselves are really nice.
Balls for 10 minutes.
A little bit more ease in, like here on the hips, they sort of suddenly engage out of nowhere. But you're doing the right thing with the shift and back to the leg.
End up right back here with the same problems.
And this gesture too.
End up right back here with the.
You could probably just hang out in this pose a little more rather than follow through all the way back to where you were. But I'm being a little picky here. I think you're doing a nice job. I do notice a bit of stiffness on the neck. The head seems to kind of just move with everything else, so it's a little on the stiff side. But overall, man, there's some great work in here. It's mostly the timing in that last gesture, and again some of the mechanical stuff with the ball. But be worth doing another pass in that part because this one's really close to being a really strong shot. That and fixing the eye roll as well. So there's a lot of stuff in here that's great, and it's genuinely funny because of the reaction. So anyway, so some nice work in here. A little cleanup would go a long way with this one, but nice work. Right, Nate, let's take a look.
Yeah, I'm 30 years older than you are. Had my back broke once and my hip twice. And on my worst day, I could beat the hell out of you.
All right. So there's some good stuff in here, but there's some things keeping it from being a good shot in my mind. It's a little bit harsh, but because I know there's a good bit of work in here too. The main thing for me is context, which is I'm trying to picture where this conversation would happen while this guy's working at a computer. So what I do like is, it's easily apparent that he's working on something on the computer. There's no doubt about that. So he's definitely involved in an activity. But again, I'm trying to think of the situation where someone would be like telling this sort of story with that sort of finish to someone that's clearly like not engaged with them on the computer. Like it's different if they were out at a bar or a boxing ring or camping or maybe at school. So I'm just trying to figure this out, and because I'm having to stretch a bit, it's taking away from the buy-in for the shot. Obviously not something worth changing. That would be a whole different performance if you put the character somewhere else. Just with this dialogue clip, it's just such an odd thing to say to someone working at the computer. I like the fact, that aside, I like the fact that he's engaged in the computer, and you're establishing that this guy is off to the side over here. This is kind of a great moment with the, come on, like, what's wrong with you? Which I think is great. And like a lot of your gestures read really well. So that's kudos to you. I do think though, compositionally, this is an odd one. You have so much space here. Like this character is like, 8 to 10 feet away talking to him about kicking his ass. and it just makes for an odd setup. I think here, I'll pull up my drawing tools. So, you know, if your framing was a lot tighter like this, it'd be a much easier time to believe that the other character was, you know, right over here. I guess that'd be a bit bigger, but you get the idea. That if we had less frame there, it's easier to picture them closer, and therefore kind of makes the engagement work a little bit better. So there's two things now kind of working against us believing these two characters are in the same scene. The contextual setup, and then also the framing there as well. The other thing going on here is, again, while I really like your ideas and gestures, and especially your expressions are really good, in general, you're animating really slow. Let's look at the timing of things.
Yeah, I'm 30 years older than you are.
So this timing's fine. I would just say like the wrist feels kind of stiff and awkward over here. And then this hand is sort of just doing nothing.
Had my back broke once.
Not sort of, it is doing nothing. So it just feels really locked in kind of an awkward way. So I'd love to see a little more subtlety there in terms of your movement.
My back broke.
Be careful here. We should always be able to see the pupils on the eye, so they should never go white like this. That just disengages us from the character.
My back broke once.
So here, this gesture,
Once.
it's sort of floating in and floating out. There's never like, and again, awesome expressions. They're really great. The only thing I have to critique about your expressions are that your brows often go flat when they should stay a little bit arched in one way or the other. Flat just flattens out the face. So here,
Back broke once.
you know, here it'd be much better if the character wasn't drifting to his
My
left
back broke once.
and then just kind of fading into this new pose. I'd much rather see the character engaged here, maybe the eyes flickering back and forth as he's reading on the screen, and then just a straight move to get over here, just like we saw there. And then most importantly, once you get over there, hang out for a second. So pause, let him register information, and then let him have him come back. But the fact that we sort of float in
Once.
and float back out means we don't really get any impact in that moment. We see what's happening, we see what you're telling us is happening, but it just doesn't read very well.
Twice. And on my worst day. Twice.
So this, I'm not sure the nodding's necessary. He's definitely not like accepting any of this. He's like, again, building to a, come on, dude.
My worst day.
So here, I know you're keeping him alive, but it's actually fine to let him stay still for a while. You have a nice sense
Twice.
of like getting your weight and coming back to a stable point here. You could just hang out and let him like mouse and type a little bit.
And on my worst day,
rather than nod his head and then drift down.
Beat the hell out of you.
So because you're constantly having him like go from one gesture to the next and never giving him a chance to pause, it just feels kind of like he's on autopilot, and it makes him less believable. In terms of the timing, you can really see it here too. If you just like say, just watched his right arm, like it's a nice gesture, but it takes forever to finish. It starts to feel really gooey and soft.
Out of you.
Whereas his head is a good example of good timing.
Hell out of you.
The head gets up there and locks down and is done. I guess long story short, you have a tendency to really to draw out your movements and let them drift from one movement to the next or one pose to the next. I'd much rather you get there a little faster, do a nice follow through, and then hold it, or just hang out in that space a little bit before you then move to the next one again faster. It'll start to make your work sound much better, especially because like this expression is great.
The hell out of you.
This little change expression here, also great.
The hell out of you.
Although also a little bit gooey. But then a little eye roll in there before he comes over, and it's like, what the hell, man? Like, all that stuff reads great. You got some nice movement in the hips. So you're doing all the right things. It's just that drifting between poses. Play around with trying to get there faster and hang out there for longer. Your work will start to sell much better. But overall, a good read on this one. again, my biggest thing is contextually what's happening and why did this happen here, wherever he is. Hey, CJ, you're next. Let's take a look at what we got.
You are despicable. I challenge your so-called talents. I can do anything better than you. Yes, I can. Yes, I can. Yes, I can.
All right. So first of all, love the setup here. This actually blends crazy good with this background. So I totally buy this setup, and I love that Hanna-Barbera. Oh, I guess it's more, we're looking more like Chuck Jones, aren't we? Rabbit hole. Awesome. So I love that setup. Really smart, great lighting, looks really good. I do, however, I'm struggling with the setup in terms of the story you're setting up. So I love the idea that he's reading the paper. This is cool. But with this particular voice, Daffy Duck is upset, like really upset, and like clearly they've had some kind of interaction right before, but this guy hasn't been interacting with anybody. He is in his chill, enjoy reading the paper state. So this is pretty funny though, by the way, the actual paper. So for me, I'm struggling to kind of place myself within this moment, like what was happening in the shot right before. And while that seems like that wouldn't be super important, it is, like in terms of getting your audience buy-in for the shot. And so it makes everything this character is doing not feel, it doesn't feel like it connects with the moment, despite the fact your performances are fun. So I'm struggling a bit with that, despite the fact, again, the scene looks great, and I like in terms of an activity for someone to be doing, reading the paper. Your pose is really good. There is some weird shit going on here, like his legs look good, but his butt is clearly like non-existent and hovering above the bench here. So those things feel like they shouldn't matter, but they do. I'd much prefer, like, if you can't get a pose that looks good, or if the rig is working against you, which it is here, maybe choose a different pose, even though I like this setup. You might be able to do like the pull the knee out a little bit and drop it to get his butt to touch the ground, or touch the bench again. But something has to happen there. That's a little bit awkward. In terms of the gestures,
you are despicable. I challenge you.
I like the sort of like casual, I'm not really quite listening to you thing. It's pretty funny.
So-called talent. I can do anything better.
This gesture I really like.
Talent. I can.
In terms of the idea and the expression, like, geez, dude, get off of it. But it feels really stiff.
I can do it.
And it's right on the, it comes, how do I say it? It kind of just connects directly with this next gesture.
I can do anything better than you. Yep.
Which does kind of make sense.
I can do anything better than you. I can do any.
Sorry, CG. I'm totally struggling with my words this morning. Clearly. The gestures just feel like they're kind of connected and disconnected at the same time. It just feels kind of like you're plugging them in there, as opposed to, I shouldn't say that. I know you're thinking it out because I can see it happening. I think because of the stiffness of this one,
better than you.
And without any sort of pause in there,
I can do anything better than you.
Man, I'm struggling. I'm struggling. Something about this feels off, and I'm not quite figuring it out is what's happening. So I think part of it is just that this gesture feels mechanical, and like this one finishes, the next one starts, and the next one starts. They're just like right on the heels of each other, and yet they're all gestures that are initiated by thought. And I guess that's the thing, is that I feel like you need to break that up a little bit. Like, give the character a moment to, like, after this one, be like, huh? Were you saying something? And then maybe this one finishes that gesture, and he's just like, dude, get off of it. And then you pause, and then you bring the other one in. Or probably better, which is I think what you're setting up, is he does this gesture here. And then maybe you give it a moment's pause for him to continue reading. And then the next gesture that he hangs out for a second and then does this, followed by the bring it gesture. So I think you just need to break those up. They're just too tightly packed for someone to be thinking like 3 different thoughts on the heels of each other, enough to necessitate those 3 different gestures. It's a lot packed in a short period of time. Sorry that took so much to get out. The gestures too, as I mentioned, this one feels very mechanical, just because he's returning to the exact same pose. And then the head itself, the gesture is very, on axis.
I can do anything better than you.
And this one, I like the idea, but it's so big, and the hand's doing some kind of weird things in there. This would be much better if it was just more of a wrist gesture, as opposed to a full arm gesture. I think it would sell much better.
Yes, I can.
But I like the idea.
Yes, I can. Yes, I can.
And then this whole build up here, I love the idea as well, but it's also really stiff. So, the arms and the back are moving together perfectly, as is the neck and the head. It just feels really stiff, like this entire gesture is happening from the back alone. I like the build up on it though, which is really nice. The floating paper though is pretty distracting.
Yes, I can. Yes, I can. Yes, I can.
Because this hand is connected to the paper, you kind of have 2 choices here. Again, kind of like the push and pull. Oh, that was after this. All right, I'll forgive it just because we hadn't yet gone over the constraining. But hopefully now you would know to constrain one hand to the paper and then constrain the other hand to the paper. Constrain the paper to one hand and constrain the other hand to the paper to make that more convincing. So I'll let that go.
Yes, I can.
But I like the timing in this a lot. This last part is really great, and it's a great build-up. So even though, again, I'm thematically struggling to figure out how these people are having this conversation, I think you're doing great gestures. The biggest thing here just be mechanically to loosen this up. Get some overlap in the back. Get some overlap in the head. For this one, it might be stronger to have the character look over and then change the expression to this, because it would then we get to see the expression change, which tends to be stronger. So it's more mechanical issues and thematic issues here. But I like the way you're thinking. I like the way you're setting things up. I wouldn't go back and change all that just because I'm not into the theme, but I would go back if you're into it and fix up the animation itself. Loosen it up a little bit, get more overlap in there. Maybe play with the timing, or if you can't fit it all in there, you could safely lose. You could probably lose this gesture right here. It's really fun, but he's so engaged with the paper. Like, he wouldn't ask for more shit from this guy. He'd just be like, dude, let it go. So if I was to lose one gesture, it would be this one. Just again, thematically, it doesn't quite fit for me. Okay, I'm gonna stop rambling. Hopefully that's stuff to think about. Again, a lot of fun stuff here. You always do good fun stuff. But some things to focus on and clean up as well. Hey, Peculiar, you're up next. Let's take a look.
I couldn't do that. Could you do that? How can they do that? Who are those guys?
All right. Not bad. For me, I'm struggling a little bit. So, first of all, like, the scene setup is great. Compositionally, it looks great. The character working with the dumbbell is great. I'd say with this audio clip, it feels a little bit of a stretch, only because the way the character is talking, they feel really engaged with this person, and this person's clearly engaged in their own thing. They're not people watching together somewhere. He's working out. But that being said, when people work out, they tend to chat and talk about stuff, so I could totally buy that. For me, it's a matter of the timing of these different interactions. So I think you have some good gestures in there, and then you have some moments that are a little confusing. So whoever's talking is clearly really engaged with what's happening over there. And this guy, I'd say, is kind of half engaged. Whoever he's talking, whoever his friend is there, like, they're decent buddies, and while he's doing his task, he's also probably curious about what this guy is talking about. It'd actually be fun if he got more curious, rather than be kind of dismissive, or just being like, yeah, I don't know. So for me, as I'm watching this,
I couldn't do that. Could you do that?
It's a good start. I think you need to be, I like the fact that you're you're connecting with whoever he's talking to, and it's off screen in a way that we could kind of believe that there would be someone over there.
How can they do that?
And I think the timing on this is pretty good. I don't know about the narrow eyes right there. This would be maybe more open and questioning, and then I'd save that sort of narrow-eyed focus for that look. You're kind of going from super narrow, or narrow to super narrow right there, but that's pretty subtle. We'd want something probably bigger. So maybe here would be the more open-eyed questioning look, and then when you move to look with the more squinty eyes at whatever the guy is referring to, that will make him seem more curious. Really important here, though, I think he needs to really look at it. It's really a fast glance.
How can they do that?
Like if he actually hung out here for a second and looked, even a couple seconds, and looked at what was going on, maybe he had like another question expression here, or maybe he leaned into it a little bit, would show more he's reacting to what's being said. The fact that we're just there for a few frames doesn't work as well. And then I'm not really sure about this gesture. So he's kind of looking all over the place. Like I don't know who he's addressing right there. And then he's kind of pointing at it, which is sort of a weird thing. So I'm not really sure what this gesture
Can they do
means.
That?
You could have even had some fun here where like he looks over and he's like, what? And then maybe he does like a surprise what and drops the weight and then goes and picks up the weight like, oops, didn't mean to do that. So he could have more of an actual response to whatever he's seeing over there. That could be really fun, especially in this environment. Instead, this gesture just is kind of confusing to me.
Who are those guys?
And then again, I like this idea of the gesture here, but I can't tell what's going on because he's looking everywhere. There's only two things he should be looking at. His buddy, which is right there, or the thing, which is right there. But he keeps like kind of going into all those other places. Like, who is he looking at right there? I don't know. Who's he, right here. Who's he looking at? I don't get it.
Who are those guys?
So you need to ditch this eye angle. I'm not. Clearly, you have someone in mind that he's looking at right here because he keeps coming back to it. It really feels like us, which is a bad idea. You don't want to have him look at us. So not even close. You don't want to be anywhere near looking at us. It breaks that illusion of the scene. And this is already a tough one to set up. So to me, if I was to fix this up, I would have, again, the more definitive moment here where he actually looks at it. So I'd play this up a bit more. I would kill this whole moment right here when he puts the weight down. Or I just have him, instead of looking all over the place and pointing, he just puts the weight down. He doesn't have to like still be engaged with thinking about that thing over there. And then change this last look so that he's probably still looking at those people. Or goes back and looks at his friend instead of us again. So to me, it's more a matter of how you're breaking up that space. And again, that one gesture that's really not clear. I think if you can do that, this would sell way better. Right now, it's a little confusing, even though we understand more or less what's happening. All right, Eleanora, let's take a look.
You are despicable. I challenge your so-called talents. I can do anything better than you. Yes, I can. Yes, I can. Yes, I can. You are...
All right. So, great setup here with the office. Compositionally, it's really strong. I clearly know that he's working on the computer and he's not super engaged with it, which is good. It's funny. Nate did a similar shot. Maybe take a look at his too. I have a similar issue with yours I do with Nate's, which is that in this case, you have a character who is really frustrated and very angry with you, or angry with this character. And I'm wondering how that comes about when this person has clearly been here for a while and engaged in the computer. So there's a bit of a separation between what's being said and the scene that I find myself in. That being said, your camera is kind of working to your advantage here. It feels like I can almost picture like a kid coming up and asking for a favor, and then the parent being like, "I can't do that. We don't have time for that. We can't afford it," or whatever the case is. Or no, you can't go play with Jack, whatever. So I could kind of picture a scene like that. It's a little bit of a stretch, but I could feel it. And your camera sort of lends itself to that, especially because when the character swings around and looks over here at the person talking, and engages them more directly. You can kind of picture there being some sort of more altercation there. So I like that idea. So I think you're getting away with it to some extent. That being said, I love how this starts out with the character being engaged in the computer and then turning. But once they're here, there's very little reaction, I feel like, to what's being said. The characters are sort of deadpan, maybe a little questioning.
Think better than you. Yes, I can. Yes, I can. Yes, I can.
So part of it is the gestures are really floaty. So
you. Yes, I...
if we just turn off the audio and just watch the timing here, the gestures feel a little bit on the slow side for, again, someone reacting so much. There's not much in the sense of follow-throughs here. Like here, the character just kind of dies when they hit this pose. And then here, that's not a bad gesture. Just, again, it's someone freaking out, and I don't really see some sort of... I don't see a direct connection there with this character. He's not, like, overwhelmed by it. He's not annoyed by it. He's just sort of, like, I can't really tell his sense here, especially, like, when he's looking around over here. Like, I'm not really sure what he's looking at. Is he staring at the statue or something when he comes back? It's not even quite sure what he's looking at right there. I know it's the character, but, like, that position is sort of odd. Like, right here with the eyes where they are, the person is standing up that he's talking to is off to the side of the desk. But then when we come back to it, that's fairly similar. I guess it's fairly close. It just feels like he's disengaged the entire time. Like that, up to this point, I think it's really nice. Some funky stuff happening with the mouse, but hopefully after the push-pull exercise, you have a better sense of how to fix that. Here, I'm not quite sure what he's doing with his left arm. So I think that gesture needs to be a little bit more clear, and then I'd buy it. In this case, his right arm is quite a bit distracting because it's just sort of floating over there in space. So I'd want that to get over somewhere there. And if it's not hovering in the air, well, if it's hovering in the air, that's a problem. It looks like it's kind of resting on this side of the arm, but if it's resting, then why is it moving the whole time? So you need to get over there and let it die, because his face and this arm are the more important ones. But again, we have this character calling him out.
I can do anything better than you. Yes, I can. Yes, I can. Yes, I can.
And his gestures just don't seem to be in time to this person, like, elevating their level of freak out significantly. So I'd much rather see here...
Better than you.
You know, maybe he gets over here and he can just hang out for a minute, like staring at him. Maybe he's shaking his head a little bit, like, dude, this isn't going to get you anywhere.
Yes, I can. Yes, I can.
So I think he can't be quite this disconnected from the content, I guess is what I'm saying. He seems completely uninterested, and yet he just turned his chair on, which, by the way, this is a great gesture. And he just turned his chair to actually, like, address it more directly, and instead isn't addressing it directly. So I'm just a little bit lost as to what's happening in the second half of this. The animation's decent. Mechanically, it's working pretty well. This gesture is a little bit stiff on that left arm, especially, just kind of a little too locked on the elbow. And then the right arm is a little bit distracting there. So I think that second half needs a little bit more, like, recognition that this person is losing their shit. And right now, I just don't feel any connection to that. He's disconnected the whole time, we could put any old dialogue in there, and it might work out the same way. So I want something more specific to this dialogue. Hey, Eva, let's go ahead and check out your shot.
We're not doing this, gentlemen. We are not going to do this. We're not going to go bouncing off the walls for 10 minutes, because we're just going to end up right back here with the same problems. We're not doing this, gentlemen.
All right. So I mentioned this in class, but in terms of your setup here, it's hilarious. It is so great. It's perfect for the bouncing off the walls and the bouncy house, and it's just really nice. Your shot's a little bit overexposed. It's pretty hard to look at in terms of, like, the background is so bright, and the character is really bright too. It's not a lighting class, but I would just tone this down a little bit, especially to get the separation between the bouncy house and the background, just because the bouncy house, we have to immediately get it, which we do, but Like here, the fact that this hill back here is lining up perfectly with the side of the house. You can't really tell where this starts and stops. And that's kind of exacerbated by the blown out light. So I'm not taking off for that. I just want you to be aware of it. In terms of the actual performance by the character, I'm really enjoying it. I like to start with him actually like basically saying, "Can we go play?"
We're not doing this, gentlemen. We are not going to do this. We're not.
And then the change to, "Oh, this isn't going the way I wanted."
Not going to go bouncing off the walls for 10 minutes because we're just going to end up right back here with the same problems. We're not doing this, gentlemen. We are
Just
not
your
going to do
timing.
this. We're not going to go bouncing off the walls for 10 minutes because we're just going to end up right back here with the same problems.
I think your first set of gestures are timed really well. It's mostly him recognizing like this isn't going the way I want. And then this gesture here
For 10 minutes.
is a bit early for me.
For 10 minutes. Walls for 10 minutes.
Because he's objecting to the thing that's just being said, is what my take is. But the thing hasn't been said yet.
10 minutes.
Like he's still saying 10 minutes. So if you were to delay this gesture by probably a good 20 frames, 10, 20 frames, it would happen after that dialogue was said and feel more like a direct response to it, which would be stronger.
Because we're just going to end up right back here with the same problem. We're just going to end up right back.
This one too, maybe a little bit early, so you could shift that whole kind of second half a little bit later. It would work more as a reactionary response, but you're getting away with it to some extent just because the guy is still yelling at him or yelling about the situation, and therefore he could just be reacting to the emotional state that, hey, this isn't going to happen. But I think it would sell better if it happened a little bit later. I love the little scratching the arm gesture as well as nice. My main bone to pick here is just that mechanically this is pretty stiff. When I scrub through, the character's making some good movements in the upper back and upper body, but I'm not seeing much in the hips, and so the hips feel really stiff and locked in here. You wouldn't need much here, but you just don't want the character to be like stuck like a pogo stick right there. You want a little bit of shifting, to the side here and the side here to make it feel more natural, not like the character's stuck in space. Wouldn't take much. It would go a long way.
We're not doing this, gentlemen. We are not.
I'm getting a sense too, it's probably your lack of overlap in here. Yeah, like here, if I look at the head, there's no overlap. It's just stuck to the shoulders and the body. Here, this is just a very linear move. We're not getting any sense of arcs in the movement here at all, so it feels also really stiff and dead. Along with, like, from pose to pose, like, this arm is just stuck in the air. So, you don't have to do much here. Just, when the character looks over here, just drop the arm a little bit, relax the wrist, or tension the wrist. Or you're also, everything's happening all at once and stopping all at once. So, again, mechanically, no overlap here at all. For this type of gesture, as the character turns, I would delay the arms. I probably would have the expression change first, and then move the shoulders, and then have the arms come over. Usually the dominant arm goes first, and other arm would come second. Also, you have this pose here that's a little bit extreme, but then it just sort of unrolls itself back to sort of a flat default pose that doesn't have much feeling. So you got to be conscientious of those things. Here again, like when the arms come up, they're starting and stopping at literally the same time. Choose one arm. Again, usually the dominant arm, probably right-handed, to start going first, and then have this hand come in afterwards, which would make more sense anyway, because they're kind of like going on a collision course right here. I do like the overlap in the head and then the fingers afterwards. That part's good, but the main movement is this arm movement, and it feels really stiff in that regard because of the lack of overlap there. Here too, like just looking at the arm, there's no overlap on the wrist. It just sort of comes out and drops down. This should probably be a spline tangent right here instead of a flat tangent. You don't want it to come to a stop and then settle. Again, both arms unfurl at exactly the same time and then settle at exactly the same time. Your overlap tends to be, well, no, you just don't have much. So here, like as he turns, there's no delay in the head, or the head isn't leading the action. When it gets over here, the head and the body stop at exactly the same time. So this is just basic mechanical stuff. You're doing all the hard work with setting it up, but then the finishing work of softening these things and getting that overlap is just not there. If you're confused on how to achieve that, come see me. I'm happy to walk you through it. It's not hard, but it basically comes down to there's not a lot of in-betweening happening here is what it feels like, since the overlap is the most important part of the in-betweening process. So again, really fun shot, but the mechanics aren't quite up to snuff. Hey Matt, you're up next. Let's take a look.
Yeah, I'm 30 years older than you are. Had my back broke once and my hip twice. And on my worst day, I could beat the hell out of you.
All right.
Yeah.
So, I admit I'm struggling just a little bit with the context of the situation. I don't quite know. Obviously, we're in a convenience store, so that works out fine, and it actually feels good relative to the camera. I just don't know where this character is. So, based upon what I'm seeing here, they're not the cashier, because the cashier would not be stationed in the middle of this space. And typically, like this pose, this person's like bored and done with listening to whoever's talking. But then why are they, it looks like they're kind of just like chilling in the middle of a convenience store. This feels like more like a pose I'd see at a bar, hanging out at the bar. So I'm just a little bit lost there. I'm sure you could give me an explanation, but you shouldn't have to. I should just be able to look at it and immediately understand it. Otherwise, your audience is going to be just as confused as I am in that regard. I think the sort of dismissive nature of the character works out pretty well with this speech. A lot of people took that approach, and I think it does work. That being said, and you're doing actually a pretty good job of keeping the character alive while he's not doing very much. That being said, it's not that exciting to watch, just because as a shot, there's not much happening here. Once you've chosen to have a character who's dismissive, you have to find something to keep it interesting.
Yeah, I'm 30 years older than you are.
So that's probably the most interesting thing that happens, is him like getting a little bit more bored. Which, by the way, I'd like to see that change in his face too. It's just all in the pose, which is critical, but it needs to show in the face too. So does he roll his eyes here? And
Yeah.
it'd probably be even stronger if ultimately he didn't start out like looking up at nothing and being dismissive. If he started looking at the person who's talking to establish where they are, and then look up, would be a lot stronger. And then would be even stronger by getting even more bored. And again, that change of expression.
You are. Had my back.
By the way, neutral pose for eyebrows is always a little bit of bend. When they're this straight, it flattens out the face and doesn't look very particularly convincing.
Back broke once, and my hip twice.
That was nice. I like that, even though he's really subdued, that subdued nature does enhance that one expression he makes right there.
My hip twice.
I feel like you're trying to have him look at the character, but this is so high. He's got to be looking at the ceiling. Like the character has to be standing right over him for this to sell. So I'm not buying that. We would see the character in the scene if that was the case. So if that's what you're aiming for, you need to choose a direction that he's looking. In fact, I'd say you would try to need to establish that a lot earlier.
Yeah, I'm 30 years older than you are.
I can believe that like he's looking off in space and then adjusts his gaze to look at the person talking. But if that's the case, definitely your eyes need to be lower, like somewhere in here. Would make a lot. I'm sorry, I'm just making a mess of it. Here, I'll try it with red. So probably keeping this a little bit lower. So he's looking more out towards, not towards us, but towards the camera direction than up. Right now, the eye lines to me look like, we're almost straight up in the air. And I just can't believe anyone that is there to talk to. So That's definitely worth a fix. I'm assuming that's what you were attempting to do.
You are. Had my... I'm 30 years older than you are. Had my...
The reaction there
30
of
years
nodding
older than you are.
doesn't quite work for me.
30 years older than you are.
The way it's being said, I'm 30 years older than you are, is already setting up for, I know things that you don't. So here, like a more questioning response or more, oh man, I know where this is going, which kind of fits what he's doing right here, as opposed to some sort of affirmation there. Even just like a lifting the head, like, yeah, what does that have to do with anything? Like, I can feel that much more than confirming, yes, you were 30 years older than me.
My hip twice.
This one, actually, I do like.
And on my work, hip twice.
Except for he does it while the guy is saying it, so it's not a response to what he's saying. It's just a general response to what he's doing, but a response directly to what he's saying would be stronger. So delaying this action would be better.
And on my worst day, I could beat the hell out of you. The hell out of you.
This probably happens just a hair early, but I think it's something you could believe. But the expression change here doesn't feel like much. And a lot of that comes from the fact you're not doing much, if anything, with the eyelids. There's a little bit of subtle move right there as they open up. Part of that's because your pupils are buried into the top of the head. If you were to keep those a little bit more pointing out instead, that would sell better and give you a little bit more room to play with those upper lids.
My worst day, I could beat the hell out of you.
So here, this seems like a pretty dramatic expression change for the hands, and there's almost no expression change for the face, other than the eyebrows finally get curved and rise a little bit. Sorry, that sounded a little passive aggressive. That wasn't my intention. So it just doesn't feel like much of a change. There's no change in the mouth, no change in the eyelids. He doesn't look around at all. His eyes have been kind of like fixated on that. By the way, not a single blink here, Matt. Get him blinking. Stay alive. So he just, overall what I'm getting to is he doesn't feel particularly engaged with his voice, which is kind of seems intentional, but then it doesn't really make sense with what his head gestures are doing, and then this gesture here at the end where he finally has a change. Again, you could argue, well, but the guy just said I'm going to beat him up. But he's been dismissive all along. Is that really going to be a massive change for him? And if so, like a better change here, if it really is like, whoa, 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 chill out. In that case, I get him off of his fist here. Like, you're not going to like do like a hey and still have him relaxed on his arm. I just don't buy that. So I think you're underplaying this performance. And you need to keep him in that state, or you need to do something a little more expressive. And something a little more expressive, I think, would be better just to keep it more interesting. Okay? So, unfortunately, this is a lot of different things depending on which way you would take it. So it's not just like a one answer fix. But I guess going forward, I want you to be thinking more about maintaining that context of where we are, what the relationship is, and what the likely response would probably be. And then again, more work, a lot more work, especially with something that's this limited on the face. Like really get into those expressions, and that would be a lot more fun. Hey, Serene, you're up next. Let's take a look.
I couldn't do that. Could you do that? How can they do that?
All right. So I gotta say this one is confusing me a bit. I'm trying to figure out exactly why, but a lot of it just isn't communicating very clearly to me what's actually happening. So we kick off here, and he's looking at someone, looking at maybe one of the businesses over here. I don't really feel like he's looking at someone else on the bench, only because his gaze is somewhat high. I think it kind of levels out. Yeah, here this is much more convincing that he's talking to someone on the bench, or was. But the big thing here is that his first movements here, I'm just not sure what he's doing. Like, is he looking at his shoes? I'm not sure what this gesture is.
Could you do that?
Like, is he rubbing his
Could you
chin?
do that? How can they do that?
So I don't know what these first few gestures mean. I think you're trying a little too hard to keep him engaged with the person talking. when it would be better if he's engaged in his own interests, his own motivation, his own activity, and then ultimately then pays attention to the guy when he asks the question. Or he can start off doing his own thing. He could be reading a book, he'd be checking out his phone, and then look over at the guy. That gives him weight and presence. But since we start here, he's, some questionable thing over here, and then he looks down for some reason, looks up for some reason. So I'm just looking up for some reason. Actually, even here, like if you just started here, like that reads so much better. He's doing his own thing. He hears a voice, and then he looks up. I still don't know what this gesture means. That one's confusing to me. But him assigning weight to that voice would be much more powerful than him looking at the person and then looking away again. The nod here, or the shaking of the head, that's timed out pretty well. It's hurt a little bit by the fact that he's already kind of shaking his head before he shakes his head, but I like that little arm drop there. It's just really stiff. There's not much in the way of overlap. There's no overlap, and it's all happening from the shoulder. The hand doesn't change at all, so it feels very stiff, I guess is what I would say. I don't know what's going on here. We're losing the eyes quite a bit. If he's supposed to be thinking here, I might just be getting lost in the highlight in the eyes. But that's pretty weird to look at. I don't know what's going on there. Again, he's putting his hand up to his face as if he's going to do something, but then it's not doing anything. Just kind of wiggles around in the same pose. Like I think we've been in the same pose for like multiple poses now. Maybe even since the beginning. Looks like it. So the hand is just kind of stuck, and it's an extremely expressive part of the body. I'm not sure what he's doing here. It looks like he's trying to brush his teeth or something. So you're being very loose with your gestures, but you need to be very specific. This last part too, just timing wise, like it's timed out exactly with the voice, and therefore it feels like maybe he's supposed to be speaking and he hasn't been lip synced yet. It's confusing, and then he just stops the remaining like 100 frames of the shot. So I'm assuming that you didn't. Let's see. And you stop a little bit before the end of the actual shot. Well, maybe not. But even that's pretty dead. It's a really stiff finish here. You need to finish this out with a nice follow through on the body parts, and then get rid of the extra, 80, 90 frames here that aren't doing anything. So, but the big thing for me is I don't know what he's doing throughout this shot. He doesn't seem particularly engaged with anything. Like, again, he doesn't need to stare at him the whole time. He could be looking at the thing that this guy was looking at and maybe trying to figure it out would make more sense. I just don't know where this guy is, and I don't know where the thing is that they're both looking at, and I don't know what the gestures are. So I end up just being very confused, along with, again, a pretty stiff animation. Here, there's no overlap on the head. There's no overlap on the wrist almost anywhere. The hand pose never changes in the one hand that we get. So this one needs some more work for sure. Right, Lakshmi, this is the shot. Let's check it out.
And did you stop and think that maybe infants need darkness? That maybe darkness is part of their natural development?
No.
Mm-mm. And did you stop and...
All right. There's some issues here that we're going to address in just a minute, but it's not the most exciting shot to watch just because the character's not doing anything. They're just listening. But this reads well, and your timing's really good.
And did you stop and think that maybe infants...
I love the start here, looking away.
And did you stop and think...
Thinking, I can see the eyes moving.
Maybe infants...
And then looking up here, I even love the fact that body and head go up, and then the eyes are delayed there. It's a really nice touch. It kind of leaves him kind of steeped in his thoughts a little bit longer, which is really nice. And the timing of this versus the voice is great. You immediately feel like this person's listening to the person talking. So a really great start.
Darkness? Darkness.
I like the idea of the gesture here. The gesture itself doesn't work out great, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But I like the idea and the timing of it.
Part of their natural development.
And the little finger movement there is kind of nice. And then here, like the character thinking a little bit, timed out really well. And then this part's my favorite right here, that the character has the reaction before they say it, and say it in the way that they feel ashamed. So this is just a great start to that, which is like, no, I didn't.
No.
And then they say what they just thought. And that gesture really shows that thought.
And did you...
So it's really, it's nice gestures, well thought out, and well timed. So why the criticism at the beginning? Well, face-wise, you're not doing much in the way of posing. Again, we don't want to leave the brows flat like this. You want a little bit of curve to them so it feels naturally like it goes with the skull. This is just sort of the default max pose, and it's not a good one. They're also pretty high for a character kind of neutral. So this is much better. That little bit of curve starts to feel like a real eyebrow. You had one in there somewhere else too. Yeah, for a second there, they get a little life right here. But this is, again, pretty high for like sort of a neutral pose.
Stop and think that maybe infants need dark. And did you stop and think that...
Although as a thinking pose, that's nice. But I would start out then, not default flat, but I'd start it a little bit lower so it can raise into that position. Likewise, I don't think your eyelids change their position at all, ever. They blink once, but there's no change there. And that's where we're getting a lot of emotion from. If someone feels guilty, someone feels elated, if someone feels curious, we're going to see it in their eyelids before anything else. And we don't get any of that here with this character. The rest of this is a lot of mechanics. So like here, there's no movement on the hips at all. Now the character's not doing a lot of movement, but they are moving. And certainly we'd want to involve the hips in that. A lot of your movements, like here on the shoulders and the head, they're completely flat. If we're looking at the axes, they're just going right along with the axes of movement, which is really dull. You want to try to get at least a couple axes there. Remember that when your character bends forward, the hips should go back to compensate. And when the character goes back, the hips should go forward to compensate. So we should see some of that. A lot of your gestures just don't include any overlapping action, like here in the head and the shoulders and the neck, no overlap. Here, no overlap on the wrists. This one kind of has a follow through. The other one doesn't have any. This has no follow through.
No.
No follow through. No anticipations anywhere. So it just feels really flat, pose to pose, without much life to it. And then fairly neutral in the expressions. Now her voice is somewhat neutral, but you can tell there's shame in there, and that's what you animated too. So I want to see that in the facial poses too. So you're thinking the right things, but the execution isn't there. Also note that for a character that's supposed to be crossing their arms or relaxing their arms, you're close to a decent fake, but you're not quite there. With this hand not even grabbing the arm. This one's decent, grabbing the body. That works pretty well. But this one's just hovering on top of there. It's kind of a funky angle on the wrist. I'm not really buying that one. So, again, this is going good places, but the execution needs a lot of polish. Hey, Ian, you're next. Let's take a look at what we got.
You are despicable. I challenge your so-called talents. I can do anything better than you. Yes, I can. Yes, I can. Yes, I can. You are despicable. I challenge your...
All right. Ian, I think this shot is working out really great. I think you've chosen a great subject matter here in order to have this voice work. It totally makes sense. You know, the critic and the artist, I love it. And the extra max over here, just perfectly done. So, and the beret, it's all there. So really, really smart. Really nice timing in the performance as well. Completely convincing in my mind. Nice poses, understated, but exactly what you should be doing for this.
Talents. I can do anything better than you.
I love the sag in the body there.
Yes, I can.
And even best, like, a tendency for people here is to, like, show horror at the character who's yelling at them as they kind of ramp up. But I love this choice here of him being uncertain and then here feeling hurt and depressed and then double checking his work and then just feeling more depressed. Like, it's really great. So I think you're killing it on this one. That being said, this is a small thing, but your wrists and your thumbs in particular feel really awkward. Your thumbs feel really stiff, like they're stuck out there. It doesn't feel relaxed. So try to relax those thumbs a little bit more. Use the spread function to kind of decrease that angle a little bit. And then the wrists also felt pretty tight to me. Not up here. This is nice. You're doing a really good job keeping them alive and keeping them subtle. They break nicely here. That's really good too. But for the rest of it, those wrists and the thumbs kind of lock down and feel really dead. So I would do another pass on this just because this is working out so nicely. Like, this could actually work out to be a real shot if you polished up that end. Nice job on the expressions too. Just be careful right here. It feels like the outside of the eyebrows are stuck, and so they start to feel kind of wormy. So make sure that when the inside is moving up, the outside of the brow is moving up a little bit too, which might just mean that here you might need to dip the brows down a little bit more so they have somewhere to go. Might be necessary. I love the expressions though. They're really great. So yeah, I think overall this is just a really nice shot. A little bit of cleaning up on the wrists and the thumbs, and I think you got something you can probably put on your reel. So nice work. Right, Echo, you are up next. Let's take a look.
We're not doing this, gentlemen. We are not going to do this. We're not going to go bouncing off the walls for 10 minutes, because we're just going to end up right back here with the same problems. We're not doing this, gentlemen.
All right. So, Echo, this one needs some work in my mind. There's a lot of mechanical issues going on here, which we'll talk through. You also have a much harder job here with this character with a giant hat, because that hat, as it's moving through the scene, is really distracting. So when you have a prop that can be that distracting, that's this big, it's going to kind of dominate the scene. Man, what is that up on top of the hat? It's like a wheel. Ultimately, it's going to really change the way you animate, because you don't want to be distracting with it. You want it to feel natural, which means you're going to do much smaller movements with her to make that work. But the other part of this is I'm not really buying the reactions here. So
we're not doing this.
To me, it strikes me you really need to be thinking about that moment before. Like, how do we get here? What was just happening in the previous shot? Why, what got her to the point where she's standing at the bar and this other guy is yelling at multiple people, not just her. And she's starting the shot happy and ready to drink.
We're not doing this, Jim.
And she goes ahead and takes a drink.
We are not going to.
And then reacts to whoever's talking, I'm assuming. If someone's already like on the verge of being that irate, something happened to trigger them, and she'd be reacting to that first. I'm also having a really hard time telling where anybody or anything is. So if we look at her eyes, obviously she's looking at the mug first.
We're not doing this, gentlemen. We are not going to.
And then she looks over here, which we assume like the guy would be there, but this is a bad way for her to look in this particular composition, because it means the person that's talking is like, probably 16, 17 feet away. Maybe at the minimum 10. And that's a really awkward way to have this sort of intimate conversation. So I'm not really buying that there's someone over here that she could be talking to. And she's not even looking down the bar. She's looking across the bar, which could be the bartender, but again, way out of the way. So it's very awkward.
Do this. We're not going to go bouncing off the walls for 10 minutes.
And then she doesn't really look back there. We kind of get this sort of glance here, but it's really stiff. Like the eyes aren't locked. So her eyes are sort of like floating with her head, and so they don't really feel believable there either. This is not looking at that guy anymore. That probably is, but it's also pretty low.
So we're just going to.
And then she sort of just kind of whips back and forth, looking, but she's not really locking onto anything. So I don't really know where anybody is or what she's thinking. The only thing that gives it away, what she might be thinking, is, you know, the fact that she kind of has this exaggerated gesture here of, I'm not sure what, horror, fear, I'm not sure. And then she takes off. Taking it off is probably the one thing that tells us that she's nervous. There's also no, like, I'm seeing, there's this moment on the eyelids where they open up, and I think that might be it. Just the eyebrows raised right there, but the expressions are really limited here too. So I'm just really struggling with this one, trying to like believe that she's in a place where this guy would be yelling this.
We're not doing this, gentlemen. We are not going to do this. We're not going to go bouncing off the wall.
It's also a little tough. I mean, he does say gentleman, and she clearly isn't one. It might not be the best character to use in this context.
Bouncing off the walls for...
Unless she was like a casual observer off to the side, which could work out, but she's clearly not. Her reaction to this moment is too big. I also don't know what a lot of these gestures are. So here she's obviously drinking. I get that. Here she's not drinking. But then the rest of these, I don't really know what she's doing other than, I guess here...
For 10 minutes, because we're just going to...
She's nervous or wants to get out of there.
Back here with the same problems.
And then she goes. But none of these movements are really nuanced at all. They're pretty rough. There's, I think, no overlapping action anywhere. Maybe zero. At this stage in our classes, that's not okay. Yeah, here it's just all pose to pose. There's a little bit of overlap in the head, maybe. But none of those gestures feel natural. None of them really seem to have in-betweens. They're just pose to pose. Yeah, it's just really, really rough. And it just, you know, at least if you had a really nice weighted animation with really good performances, really good expressions, eyes leading the action, which would also be really helpful here. They just seem to float with the head all the time. There's the one look that she does do. They're kind of leading, but they don't stop moving ever. So I just don't feel that she's alive. There's no weight in the body. There's no weight in the expressions emotionally. And it doesn't really quite make sense to the scene. So this one needs some love. Going back to fix this up, I'm not sure what I'd do, just to tell you to, like, you know, maybe doing a more close-up shot in this one might help out. So there's a possibility the person that's talking to her is a little bit closer. So, you know, maybe if it was framed more like this, we could buy that there was someone there she's looking at. I like your scene. It looks good. This doesn't make sense. I mean, that's what I need it to do, is make sense.
We're going to do this. We're not going to go bouncing off the walls for 10 minutes, because we're just going to end up right back here with the same problems. This, gentlemen, we are not going to do this. We're not going to go bouncing off the walls for 10 minutes.
Yeah, and, you know, I'm glad the back is engaged here, but it's just, you know, the back and the arms, they're just not doing anything believable. And this whole part with the swinging head, I know I can't even see her face for part of it, so I don't even know how she's feeling. So there's just a lot of kind of very basic gestural stuff that just doesn't read or doesn't communicate very clearly. So that's what you really need to work on here, and then a lot of basic mechanics to make it feel weighty. Hey, Josh, you're up next. Let's take a look.
Yeah, I'm 30 years older than you are. Had my back broke once and my hip twice. And on my worst day, I could beat the hell out of you. Yeah, I'm 30.
All right. So overall, this is working out really nicely. Context is great. Immediately it works. This guy you feel immediately bad for just having to listen to this. The reaction times are really good. And the fact that they're not even like, in some cases like this one's a little bit more general.
Had my back broke once.
Like he already knows what's coming. I really like the gesture and the finger work here.
Hip
It's
twice.
Just awesome. It's really good, Josh. Keep that up. That makes such a huge difference.
And on my...
And then, man, like no one wants to do this.
At worst.
This is a nightmare to do, and actually,
beat the hell out of you.
It's really good.
Twice. And on my worst day,
the only thing
twice.
I'd say here is it'd be nice to hold it longer. If you're working in FK here, I wouldn't. This type of gesture, it's just so difficult to get the fingers to not like go through each other. This is definitely something that would be very easy to do with IK and just annoying as hell to do with FK. So I hope you're using IK here.
And on my worst day,
that would also make more sense then for him to get his hands all the way down, still clasped, and then unclasp them and do the little petting gesture, which looks really good too. My few, not even criticism, just things that I think you should be thinking about.
On my worst
the
day,
gestures of the hands are really good, but from here to the end,
hell
they just kind of float back to their original position. Just let them go back at a natural speed and let them hang out there. That's fine. But the sort of the slow drift here, like it's like he's gonna start doing something and then he just floats to his new pose instead. So this gesture right there dies. You need to go faster. And in general, all the motions are kind of a similar speed. It'd be nice to break it up a little bit. So for example, here,
30 years older than you are.
let's see, we straight.
Yeah, I'm 30 years older than you are. Had my back broke once and my hip twice.
So I like that first gesture. It's so slow and deliberate.
Had my back broke once and my...
Which is exactly what someone would do in his position. But what you can do to make the shot a little more, give it a little more vitality, a little more interest, is when he looks up
hip
here.
Twice. And on my worst day...
Is that maybe that one goes a bit faster, like 20% faster. And so it starts to feel like variation in timing and starts to become a lot more interesting.
I could beat the hell out of you.
That'd also give you a little more time to do your hand gesture as well. And then I feel like this is more subjective, but at the end here, there's a great opportunity for him to be like, to take it to another level. Just like as he's going down, just shaking his head like, dude, how did I end up here? How did I get stuck with this guy? Like, I feel like there needs to be something else where he's like making a conscious, objective note about his predicament, being stuck with this dude. So I feel like it dies a little bit early there. Not that this doesn't work, but it could be funnier or more interesting. And I think you're just missing that opportunity there. But honestly, that's the main stuff. Like, this is just really nicely done, well thought out, well animated. You're keeping the lower body alive just enough so we don't see it, but we don't feel that it feels stuck. And again, like, even though I'm complaining a little bit about some of the timing of the gestures, they still are timed out believably and have a good sense of weight. So,
Twice. And on my worst day...
The arms feel a little bit slow here.
Hip twice. And on my worst day, I could beat...
They do kind of drift down there. They could accelerate a little bit more and then stop a little more suddenly. So just look for opportunities to keep things a little bit more alive, a little more vitality. But overall, really nice stuff, Josh. This is a great shot. Hey, Gabriela, you're next. Let's take a look.
Yeah, I'm 30 years older than you are. Had my back broke once and my hip twice. And on my worst day, I could beat the hell out of you.
All right. So I love the context. I think the boxing ring is a great place. Clearly, the guy is challenging him and putting him down a bit. So I think this is a great space. I also like the fact that he's hurting, like he's already been in a fight, and that kind of makes more sense too, with the guy talking to him the way he is. So I really like that, this first part here where he's just trying to sort of get a foothold on things. I don't really understand the second part though. It doesn't work as well for me.
And
like the first part, he's kind of lost in his own thing and feeling bad and feeling hurt. So it makes sense that he's not really engaging with this guy. But then the second half, he doesn't really seem to be reacting to anything specific the guy is saying.
And on my worst day...
Like, he switches to this pose well before the guy even starts talking again. So that doesn't feel like it's a reaction.
Day I could beat the hell out of you.
We had this little reaction here, but he's looking at the ground, so I'm not really understanding what's going on there.
The hell out of you. The hell out of you.
And he reacts before the guy finishes speaking, so it doesn't feel, again, like a reaction to what's being said. And then the reaction ultimately, I guess, is, you know, him deciding he's going to take the other guy on. But the arms are really awkward here. So
My worst day.
this feels pretty good, like a defensive / attack pose. But the arms are really locked to the body. There's no overlap there, so they feel really stiff. And then here, when they shift kind of in unison, and this one shifts kind of oddly, like this, it's weird to have this one up by the face when this one's shifting out to the side. I guess, you know, I could, and then again, no overlap. It's just really stiff with the upper body. I guess you could say he's decided that he's going to attack back.
Eat the hell out of you.
The timing of that one's not too bad, just the posing isn't great. The whole upper body feels really, really stiff right here. And the whole upper body's kind of stiff here too, but it's masked a little bit, and then jumping up and down. But again, my biggest thing is just on the second half that he just doesn't feel like he's actually reacting to this guy, and we're not making good eye contact. There he is, like that looks great.
My worst day, I could beat the hell out of you.
But then we lose it here, and then we kind of regain it here. But that moment where he loses it is kind of awkward, and none of it matters here.
30 years older than you are. Yeah, I'm 30 years older than you are.
You also don't seem to have any anticipation or follow through in the hips. They're just pose to pose, which means we're losing a lot of weight there. And then right here when he comes up and then moves forward, it's very linear. You know, there's an up and down motion whenever we walk. So use that even when you don't see the feet. Here, when he's doing these nice, really nice structures up top, I really like these. But again, the hips aren't working with it at all. They go really stiff. So that's something you want to keep an eye on as well.
Yeah,
Hands are a little stiff, so when you're going in for this pose, the hand's kind of locked in this pose. It should be going into more grabbing pose somewhere in here. And then, you know, it shouldn't just like snap on there. It needs to open up and then close on there. So those changes in the hand are really important for us to buy into the character. Here, you know, again, be careful. That shoulder and the elbow look really locked in on the left.
yeah, I'm 30 years older than you are.
Not really quite sure what's happening there. He grabs it, which I like, but then he sort of just floats right off of it again. Like he doesn't actually use that as a position to push off of. This should be IK right here, so he can.
Had my back.
We're getting a little extreme here, but it's possible. So just watch your poses. But what I really want to see is him push off of that, and he just sort of levitates forward instead. So I like the idea. The mechanics need some work. This would be a good one to film and watch what you do. It's going to include a lot more up and down motion, again, for anticipation and follow through in the hips.
And on my worst day, I could beat the hell out of you.
So in the end, you got some good stuff in here. You have some very good ideas. I love the whole idea of the first half of this, even if mechanically there's some things to fix. But that second half, you're kind of losing me at that point. I don't really feel him connecting to the voice. Got to watch those eye lines, and you got to loosen up the whole body. It's very tight. But there's a lot of potential here, and it's a really good foundation. I'd love to see you go back and clean this up. All right, Nirathraj, you are next. Let's take a look.
Yeah, I'm 30 years older than you are. Had my back broke once and my hip twice. And on my worst day, I could beat the hell out of you.
All right. This one needs some work. It looks like it's a play blast, first of all, so I do want you to actually render it. I'm just looking at all the pixelation here and the lighting being way overblown, no shadows, etc. So I'll give you a placeholder grade, but you do need to render this correctly. If you did render it, then you need to turn on shadows and lower that light a bit so it doesn't wash out everything. That's not the big thing, though. That just pulls back on the quality, but the big issue here, your timing is not great. In fact, some of your timing seems to be timed out exactly to the audio when you want it to always be after the audio. So big example of that is right here.
Had my back broke once.
It looks like he says once. It looks like he's the one talking. This is definitely not the right gesture here. I'm not, even without the dialogue, I'm not sure what that gesture means.
My hip twice.
And then here, it looks like he says twice. So it looks like he's saying the dialogue, and therefore it's very confusing since we're not seeing the other person and he's not voicing all the dialogue. You need to give a pause after he finishes that sentence.
My back broke once.
So the back broke once, then a pause, like a good 10 frames, and now he can start reacting to what he just heard. But he needs a moment to understand it.
Hip twice.
Instead, you're already well into the second gesture. And again, even for this one, you need to pause.
And on my worst day.
And then he needs to react to that one if you're going to have him react.
I could beat the hell out of you.
This is the one timed reaction that actually works in terms of the timing, but I don't understand the gesture. It's very hard for me to understand what's going on there. It looks like he thinks it's funny, except for he doesn't seem tough in any way. And just right before, a moment before, he was worried or nervous or scared. So I don't understand what this gesture is supposed to be. So in general, the big issue here is that your timing is way too early instead of after what the guy is saying. And I'm not understanding all the reactions. Mechanically, there's a lot of issues here. You have a lot of movement on the head, which is a good thing, but it's not accompanied by much movement on the back at all, which starts to feel awkward. Like it constantly feels like his head and his neck are just acting on top of a statue. The body has to be involved in these things, even just a little bit. So sometimes like right here, the body's involved and that's good, but most of the time it's just not. You have other times here where your arm is really stiff, like your arms aren't moving separately from the body at all. Always going to look really rough whenever we see that. You need to do a whole another pass on the hand poses. So we have issues here, like with the hand is going through the actual chair. This hand is kind of locked in this pose for a while. Your wrists don't overlap. This is just a straight pose to pose moment. There's no overlap or drag on the wrist here. This pose, not the best pose. The hand is really dead. The thumb is sticking way out. The hand is just sticking in space, which is really awkward. There's no follow through on the arm or the forearm or the wrist. So there's just a lot of basic mechanical issues there that are working against you, working against the shot from being believable. There's also the context here, which is I get that he's in a weight room, and that's actually a great setup, but I don't get this guy's like on a couch or something in the middle of a weight room. I don't really understand what's happening there either. This would be much stronger if he was actually, on a bench or getting ready to lift weights or something like that, rather than lounging around in the middle of a weight gym. So there's a lot of things here that are just inconsistent with the performance and with the mechanics, and it definitely needs some work. Right, Rebecca, you were last. Let's take a look.
We're not doing this, gentlemen. We are not going to do this. We're not going to go bouncing off the walls for 10 minutes, because we're just going to end up right back here with the same problems. We're not doing this, gentlemen. We are.
All right. So a lot of great stuff in there. Some really lovely gestures. I like that he's like in the moment right from the very beginning.
Not doing this, gentlemen. We are.
It does make it momentarily confusing because it feels like it could be the guy speaking. Sometimes it's better for a shot where your character is reacting, for the character to maintain their pose at the beginning, or be looking somewhere else and then look towards their subject matter to kind of draw the attention there. That helps solidify them off screen. So
we're not doing this, gentlemen. We are not going to do this.
Not quite as strong, but as soon as he grabs his nose and does this little gesture here, which is lovely, and then leans back against the wall,
for 10 minutes.
Or just leans back. Sorry. We got it. We realize he's reacting, not the one talking. So it still works, just takes a little bit longer.
Minutes, because we're just going to end up right back here with the same problems.
This gesture strikes me as a little bit odd.
Right back here with the same...
Like he's staring at something so intensely, as opposed to thinking or feeling bad, something like that. So, or being upset or angry. Like the fact that he's sort of staring here, it looks like he's actually looking at something. If he needs to think to himself, he should put his eyes up or down, but this feels pretty focused and very central. So therefore it reads more like he's looking at something.
Same problems. We're not doing it.
Be a little cautious. You're going a little fast on the eyes. It might even be one frame. Yeah. Like you can occasionally go one frame, but it's not a really common thing to do. This would be like a high action scene where maybe it's moving that fast or that distance. So you could definitely use like 3 or 4 frames to get to this pose. It'll feel a lot more natural. You do it at one other point earlier too, where the eyes dart super fast.
For 10 minutes. We're just
so right there.
Gonna end up right back here with the same problems.
This one was much better when he looks to the side here. Yeah. It's also one frame, but the head is sort of continuing that motion. But again, unless it's a really crazy character or super stylized, you want a few frames in between those keys, especially if they're on, he's moving his eyes from one side of the socket to the other. While you can get away with it, it tends to feel a little bit funky. My other thing here is I feel like you're doing too much. Like,
for 10 minutes.
This is good. And at this point, you could just have him stare at him for a couple seconds even. Just like, dude. Like maybe like a questioning gesture with his hand and that's it. But instead he does this. He's already gone back.
Off the walls for
I thought he actually would slump against the wall, which would be kind of nice.
Minutes. But we're just gonna end up.
And he does go back further than before. I could even get away with this if he just sort of like slumped his arms down, but there's still like a lot of tension in his fingers and in his elbows. At some point here, I feel like I want him just to be like, I give up. Like, no one's going to save us from this guy.
Right back here with this.
But instead, we have this very dramatic gesture to the side, which I don't understand. Like, this is the one gesture here that doesn't work for me. I don't know why he so quickly looks to the side. What would justify that?
Same problems.
Especially when he's clearly so focused on him. So I think a much stronger thing here would be to have him slump against the wall and just like stare at him like this. Maybe relax the arm a bit. And then you could jump ahead and maybe he slumps down a little further right here. And then stares off to the side. Maybe he's shaking his head at the end of this shot, something like that.
Problems.
I do like to look back too, which also works within this pose. So I think you have a lot of ways to play with this last gesture. And you need to not be afraid to let him be still for a few seconds just to sort of engage and absorb the information that's being yelled at him. So there was one other thing
go bouncing off the walls for
hand here gets a little bit awkward, slow, and floaty, especially because it doesn't change its pose. This hand also not a great array of poses there. Feels really stiff and dead, floaty as well. So you need to move those faster, and really another pass on the hand gestures would make a huge difference here in terms of buy-in and believability. So so plenty of great things in here too, but to me that last like third needs to be readdressed to tighten it up. So some good work in here, could use a little bit more.